Have you ever noticed how a man with gray hair can walk into a room and somehow seem more magnetic than men half his age? It's not your imagination. There's a name for this in psychology now. Some call it the silver fox effect, others the gray hair effect, and it describes something very real. Older, gray-haired men attracting younger women, seemingly without trying at all. This isn't about luck, and it isn't about younger women having daddy issues, which is the lazy explanation people reach for online. There's actual evolutionary psychology, social status research, and attraction science behind this. Today, we're going to unpack exactly why gray hair, something most men try to hide or dye away, can quietly become one of the most attractive things about them. And by the end of this video, you'll understand not just why this happens, but what it actually reveals about attraction in general. Let's start with the obvious question. Why would a sign of aging become a sign of attraction? Shouldn't attraction favor youth above everything else? In some narrow ways, yes, but human attraction was never one simple rule. It's a bundle of competing, sometimes contradictory instincts, layered on top of each other by hundreds of thousands of years of evolution. And gray hair happens to trigger several of the most powerful ones at once. The first is what evolutionary psychologists call a resource and survival signal. For most of human history, gray hair wasn't associated with decline. It was associated with survival itself. A man who lived long enough to go gray had, statistically, already survived hunts, conflicts, disease, famine, and hardship that killed off many others around him. Longevity was direct, visible evidence of competence, judgment, and physical resilience. There was no faking it. You couldn't dye your way into having survived 40 winters. Over countless generations, the human brain built an unconscious shortcut. Gray hair equals experience, and experience equals resources, protection, and the proven ability to keep both yourself and others alive. That instinct hasn't disappeared just because we now live in cities instead of on the savannah, and just because survival looks like paying rent instead of dodging predators. When a woman sees a gray-haired man who carries himself well, some very old wiring in the brain still quietly registers this person has resources and has survived long enough to prove it, even if she's never consciously thought that sentence in her life. This is the same mental machinery that makes certain patterns feel attractive without any deliberate reasoning behind it. It happens beneath conscious thought, which is exactly why it feels so instinctive and hard to explain. The second reason is closely tied to the first: perceived social status. Multiple studies on attraction and perceived competence have found that people consistently rate salt and pepper or fully gray hair on men as more distinguished, more authoritative, and more trustworthy than the exact same face with dark hair. Think about who we culturally associate with gray hair: CEOs, senior doctors, judges, professors, pilots. We don't picture a junior employee with gray hair. We picture someone who has already climbed. Gray hair, especially on a well-groomed, physically fit man, doesn't read as old. It reads as established. And established reads as safe to invest in, both practically and emotionally. This matters because status is one of the strongest predictors of attraction across virtually every culture that's ever been studied. It's not necessarily about money specifically, though that can be part of it. It's about competence, respect, and the demonstrated ability to navigate the world successfully. Gray hair, paired with genuine confidence, becomes a visual shortcut for exactly that. It's essentially a walking credential that doesn't require a single word of explanation. Now let's talk about the emotional side of this, because the gray hair effect isn't only about status, it's about emotional regulation. And this is where it gets really interesting. Older men, statistically and psychologically, tend to have already gone through more of life's hard moments: heartbreak, failure, professional setbacks, loss, and come out the other side with a level head. Attachment researchers have long pointed out that emotional regulation, meaning the consistent ability to stay calm, grounded, and non-reactive under stress, is one of the single most attractive traits a partner can have, at any age, in any relationship. A younger man is often still, quite understandably, in the process of developing that skill. A gray-haired man who carries himself with quiet self-assurance has usually already built it, sometimes the hard way. For a lot of younger women, this creates a very specific kind of relief. Dating younger men can sometimes mean navigating immaturity, fragile ego, insecurity, jealousy, or general unpredictability. Not because younger men are flawed, but because they simply haven't had the time yet to work through those things. A composed older man, even without saying a single word, can signal, "I'm not going to overreact. I'm not going to play games. I already know exactly who I am." That signal of emotional safety is enormously attractive, arguably more attractive, especially long-term, than raw youthfulness on its own. There's also something worth mentioning here that's less talked about: the contrast effect. When a gray-haired man is fit, well-dressed, and confident, the gray hair doesn't read as an aging flaw. It reads as a deliberate contrast against vitality. Psychologists studying perception call this a violation of expectation. We expect gray hair to signal decline, slowing down, fading energy. So when it's paired with strength, sharp presentation, and clear vitality instead, the brain notices the mismatch and pays disproportionate attention to it. That unexpected combination, visibly mature but obviously not slowing down, is more memorable and more attractive precisely because it breaks the pattern we subconsciously expect to see. This contrast effect is actually why the silver fox archetype is so specific. It's not just any older man with gray hair. It's an older man who has gray hair and still moves with energy, still dresses well, still has physical presence. Take away the vitality, and the gray hair alone doesn't do much. Combine gray hair with genuine energy and self-care, and the contrast becomes the entire appeal. Let's move to the fourth reason, which is about self-acceptance rather than biology or status at all. Men who let their hair go naturally gray instead of anxiously dyeing it or panicking about losing their youth are usually communicating something important without saying a word. I am comfortable with who I am, including the parts of me that are changing and that I can't control. That kind of self-acceptance is a direct, visible marker of the same secure, non-needy confidence we've discussed on this channel before, the trait that consistently ranks as one of the most attractive qualities in any partner, of any age, in study after study on relationship satisfaction. Contrast that with a man who dyes his hair anxiously to hide the gray, checks his hairline in every mirror, and is visibly uncomfortable with the natural process of aging. That anxiety is detectable, often within seconds, and anxiety about oneself is rarely attractive to anyone, regardless of how good the disguise is. The gray-haired men who genuinely thrive socially aren't hiding their age. They're simply not making it their problem. And that unbothered quality is deeply magnetic, because it signals a much broader kind of internal security. Now, here's a fifth reason that ties everything together. Gray hair often arrives at exactly the life stage when a man has already done the internal work we've discussed in previous videos on this channel: a self-contained identity, a secure attachment style, a life built around purpose rather than external validation. Gray hair doesn't create attraction entirely on its own, out of nowhere. It's a visible marker that often accompanies a man who has already become the kind of person these psychological principles describe. In other words, the hair isn't the cause of the attraction. It's the evidence of everything underneath it. There's a sixth angle worth exploring too, and it's a slightly different one: the mentor and guide dynamic. Evolutionary and social psychologists have noted that humans, across almost every culture, place enormous value on knowledge transfer between generations. An older, experienced person who can teach, guide, or provide perspective has historically been an asset to a younger person's survival and growth, not just romantically, but socially. This isn't about a power imbalance in a negative sense. It's about the simple fact that experience is valuable, and being around someone who has already navigated the terrain you're currently walking through can feel genuinely reassuring and enriching. A gray-haired man who shares insight without condescension, who has clearly learned from decades of trial and error, taps directly into this deep-rooted appreciation for wisdom. It's worth pausing here to address something directly. None of this means younger men are somehow less valuable or less attractive. That's not the point of this video at all. Younger men bring their own strengths, energy, spontaneity, adaptability, and often a kind of hunger and drive that comes from still building rather than having already arrived. The point isn't a competition between ages. The point is understanding why one specific pattern, gray hair on an otherwise vital, confident man triggers such a consistent, cross-cultural attraction response? Once you understand the mechanism, you understand something bigger about attraction itself. It's rarely about a single physical trait in isolation. It's about what that trait signals about the whole person behind it. So what does all of this actually mean, practically, for you? If you're a woman who finds yourself drawn to older, gray-haired men, this isn't something to feel embarrassed about or overanalyze. You're responding to a very real, very old set of signals. Status, safety, emotional stability, self-acceptance, and accumulated wisdom that your brain has been wired to notice for an extremely long time, long before dating apps or social media ever existed. It's not shallow, and it's not some kind of unresolved daddy issue. It's psychology doing precisely what it evolved to do, helping you quickly assess who might be a safe, capable, stable partner. And if you're watching this and thinking about a specific man in your own life, it's worth checking whether the attraction actually lines up with the substance behind it, rather than the surface alone. Gray hair paired with genuine confidence, stability, self-respect, and emotional maturity is an extremely powerful combination, arguably one of the most attractive combinations that exists. But gray hair paired with insecurity, bitterness, or stagnation is just hair color. The effect only really holds when what's underneath actually matches the signal being sent. A man who has let his hair go gray but hasn't done any of the internal work, who's still insecure, still chasing validation, still emotionally reactive, won't get the same response. Because on some level, people can sense the mismatch between the surface signal and the reality underneath it. This is actually a useful filter if you think about it the right way. Gray hair on its own is just a visual cue. It's the combination of gray hair with genuine self-possession that creates the effect. Which means the real lesson here isn't really about hair at all. It's about what happens when a man stops fighting the natural process of aging and instead channels his energy into becoming genuinely secure, competent, and comfortable in his own skin. The hair is just the most visible marker of an internal shift that was already happening. To sum up everything we've covered today, gray-haired men attract younger women effortlessly because of several overlapping psychological forces working together. There's the ancient status and survival signal, hardwired from a time when living long enough to go gray was itself proof of competence. There's the perceived boost in competence and trustworthiness that gray hair carries in modern social contexts, from boardrooms to first dates. There's the visible marker of emotional regulation and stability that tends to accompany men who've simply lived through more. There's the psychological contrast effect, where vitality paired with visible maturity becomes unusually memorable precisely because it breaks expectation. There's the quiet display of self-acceptance that signals real, non-needy confidence rather than anxious vanity. And finally, there's the deep-rooted, cross-cultural appreciation for wisdom and guidance that experienced people naturally seem to carry with them. None of it is magic, and none of it is manipulation. It's simply what happens when age stops being something a man fights against and hides from, and starts being something he simply carries well, with the same ease and self-assurance as everything else about who he's become. If this video helped you understand the psychology behind this a little better, let me know in the comments. Have you noticed this pattern yourself, either in your own preferences or in someone you know? Subscribe for more deep dives into the psychology of attraction and relationships, and I'll see you in the next one.